U.S. into a wider war with Russia, that they're simply not willing to do that?
We are a place in Europe, a place of freedom, a zone of freedom. And everyone thinks that we are far away from America or Canada. No, we are this zone of freedom. And when the limits of rights and freedoms are being violated and stepped on, then you have to protect us, because we will come first, you will come second, because the more this beast will eat, he wants more, more, and more.
Mr. President, you talked about the need for fighter jets. We know the U.S. is reportedly looking at how to supply Russian jets from Poland. You had requested these jets because Ukrainian fighter pilots know how to fly these Russian planes. Has there been any movement on that front?
We asked not only the United States, we asked many other countries. I'm not going to name them. We looked into this question. We know where these Soviet planes are stationed, which countries host them, and we asked these countries. And in many ways, it is the United States, in many ways, who will decide.
Do you believe the president could be doing more to help?
I'm sure that the president can do more. I'm sure he can, and I would like to believe that he's capable of doing that.
The U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said just in the last 24 hours that the U.S. is looking at credible reports that civilians have been intentionally targeted there in Ukraine, saying if so, it would be a war crime. We, of course, have seen these horrific images in these last few hours. Do you believe that Putin is deliberately attacking civilians?
Why would I care? The result is the same. People are dying. The bombardment of the schools and kindergartens, the universities, the dormitory, the bombardment of nuclear power plant, without even thinking that Europe may disappear if it really hits the unit. Every minute, every hour, every day, the same things are happening. People are dying.
Do you believe Putin is a war criminal?
I think that all people who came to our land, all people who gave those orders, all soldiers who were shooting, they're all war criminals.
Let me ask you, Mr. President, it's believed the U.S. and the West have offered help to get you out of that country alive if it comes to that. Have they made that offer, and how long will you stay?
Yes, I was offered, because there was a loss of information, and several special groups who were sent to kill me and my family. I said no, because how can I do this? I'm the citizen of my country, and I'm the elected president of these people.
So you will stay until the end, no matter what that means?
Well, I would like the end to be like in the Hollywood movies, the happy end for our country.
What would you like to say to Vladimir Putin right now?
I think he is capable of stopping the war that he started. And even if he doesn't think that he was the one who started, he should know one important thing that cannot deny, that stopping the war is what he's capable of.
For the American people and for the people of the West who have been moved by your resilience and by the bravery of the Ukrainian people, do you have a message for them?
I don't know what to say. Thank you very much. What to say to Americans. I just want you to feel and to understand what does it mean for us freedom. Because always American people, they speak about freedom, and they know what is it. And now, when you're looking at Ukrainians, I think you feel what does it mean for us. So we are not far from you. We are not far from you. And that's why, Americans, if you see and if you understand how we feel life, how we fight against all the enemies for our freedom, support us. support us, and not only with words, with concrete, direct steps. Do it, and I think we'll win, of course, together with all the world.
President Zelenskyy remaining optimistic. Our thanks to David Muir for bringing us that. And joining us now is former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, William Taylor. Ambassador Taylor, thanks so much for joining us again. You just heard that conversation between David Muir and President Zelenskyy. President Zelenskyy talked about how important a no-fly zone over Ukraine would be. Why does he keep pushing for the no-fly zone when the U.S. and NATO have repeatedly denied it?
He wants to be sure that we understand how badly the Russians are targeting and how clearly the Russians are targeting people in his country. This is tearing him apart, that civilians, Ukrainians, his citizens are being killed. I have had conversations with many Ukrainians, including senior members of the opposition. It used to be the opposition, now totally united behind President Zelenskyy. So this is felt across the board. He is reflecting the anguish that they feel. That said, he is also proud of the work that his Air Force is doing. His Air Force is taking airplanes, Russian airplanes, out of the sky, but it's limited. It's difficult for him to continue to do that. So that's why he needs to be sure that we understand the danger that his people are in, and that we understand the importance of, for example, those fighter jets that we're hoping get, the Soviet fighter jets that can come from East Europe. It's that kind of work that we need to do.
And the Kremlin says that there are 3 conditions to ending the war. Ukraine must give up on joining NATO, recognize Crimea as part of Russia, and recognize the independence of the 2 separatist regions in the east. President Zelenskyy says that they may have a solution for these demands. What might that look like?
First of all, Lindsay, it's very important that the president and that Ukraine have a solution to these issues. No one can impose their will and take sovereignty from Ukraine. Ukraine's sovereign. That means it gets to decide. President Zelenskyy gets to decide on how to respond to these. So on NATO, he's made it very clear. In fact, the Ukrainian constitution, Lindsay, has NATO and the European Union in it as the direction of where they want to end up. So President Zelenskyy knows where he wants to go. He knows that it's a security arrangement that he is after. There are lots of ways to have a security agreement or a fence with other actors. There are ways to move forward that may or may not have NATO in it. So he may have some ideas, but the key point is it's a Ukrainian decision. It's a Ukrainian decision on that. On the other 2, on the business about recognizing Crimea and recognizing Donbass as independent nations, no Ukrainian wants to do that. No Ukrainian will do that. They recognize sovereignty over all of their territory. And Donbass and Crimea are part of that territory. There may be ways to think about that. There may be ways to deal with that over time. But I think in the end, he will not recognize it. We never recognized it, Lindsay. We didn't recognize when the Soviet Union went into the Baltic states. And we have said the same thing. We're not going to recognize when the Russians go into Crimea. But again, this is a decision for Ukrainians to make. They are sovereign. They get to decide.
And more sanctions are now in place against Russia and President Putin. And more Ukrainians are armed and ready to fight. What does an off-ramp for Putin potentially look like to avoid him from escalating this even further?
So he might be able to listen to other international leaders. He might be able to listen to President Macron. He might be able to listen to the Israeli prime minister. He might be able to listen to President Xi in China. What he knows is the world is united against him. What he knows is he has lost all credibility. He is the only one who's responsible for this war, and he knows that. You talked about criminality, that he knows that that's there. So he needs to find a way out, and he can call a ceasefire. The first thing that needs to happen, Lindsay, is a ceasefire so that Ukrainians are not being killed, so his own soldiers are not being killed. That's the first thing they can do. And then there will be discussions with the Ukrainians, and he can negotiate as well as he can. And that is the method. First a ceasefire, and then a sit down, probably with President Zelensky, but certainly with their officials below that in preparation for that kind of a discussion.
And really quickly, before I let you go, how likely do you think that ceasefire would be?
Lindsay, I think there's a good chance for a ceasefire. We've had some conversations, as you've recognized, between Ukrainians and Russians on the Belarusian border. Part of that conversation, I'm told, has to do with a ceasefire. That could help. There may be ceasefires, temporary ceasefires for humanitarian corridors. So that's a step. Certainly a ceasefire for individual places could be a possibility.
Ambassador Taylor, always glad to have you on the show.
Thank you, Lindsay.
ABC News Chief White House Correspondent Cecilia Vega joins us now. Cecilia, we heard President Zelensky earlier saying President Biden can do more to facilitate getting those Polish fighter jets to Ukraine. You asked the White House about that today. What was the response?
Yeah, Lindsay, tonight the White House is really facing a lot of pressure right now to push Poland even further to deliver these planes to Ukraine. These are conversations that are still ongoing. In return, if Poland decides to do this, the U.S. would then deliver fighter jets to Poland. The reality is, the press secretary told me today, this is an extremely complicated scenario we're talking about. Think of these two things here. The logistics alone of delivering planes in a war zone, that is no easy feat. And then this issue of these planes, Soviet planes, landing in Poland, taking off in Poland, fighting a war in Ukraine, certainly would be viewed by Russia as an escalatory move in this crisis. Putin has said as much, that he would view this as a threat, certainly. The White House says, look, we're not opposed to Poland delivering these planes. It's really up to Poland whether they want to make this decision or not. And right now, Lindsay, the reality is Poland is saying this is not something they're going to do. They will assist Ukraine as much as possible, but namely, we're talking about that humanitarian aid that we've all been witnessing.
So complex, as you said. Cecilia Vega reporting in from the White House. Thanks so much, as always, Cecilia. And when we come back, the deadly tornado is killing at least 7 in the south. One confirmed as a powerful EF4 as our weather team tracks a strong line of storms moving east. We examine the role cryptocurrencies may be playing in the war in Ukraine and why one side appears to be benefiting more than the other. But up next, the concerns grow for Brittany Griner, the WNBA superstar detained by Russia, as we speak with the parents of a Marine who says that he was arrested in Russia on trumped-up charges, and they are now desperate for his release. Coming up next.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any place else. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast, now streaming on ABC News Live.
It was a scary time in the 70s. You had multiple bodies showing up in Los Angeles.
There were so many murders happening. You had to have a name for it, serial killer.
There was a human head in there. This was premeditated evil.
You have this clock. This person is going to do this again.
It's me against the killer. Who's going to win?
We'll see who laughs last.
Pat.
What came next was unlike anything they had ever seen.
Admit it, these days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
I risked my life. I put my family in danger. If I was caught, they would have put a bullet in my head. But it was the right thing to do. It was the only thing to do.
Terror plot foiled in Garden City, Kansas.
That would have been one of the most deadly acts of domestic terrorism ever in the United States. It would have been Oklahoma City.
He put his family, himself, in jeopardy for us.
Take America's #1 news with you anywhere you go, anytime, free. Download the ABC News app now. Breaking news, exclusives, 24/7. There for you with one touch. The ABC News app. Download it now. America's #1 news, ABC News. Most watched, most trusted, and streaming live to you anytime, anywhere, and free. This is ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Free to you 24/7. Watch America's #1 news whenever you want it, wherever you are, anytime. ABC News Live, streaming live and free on all platforms.
National parks are incredibly safe places, but crime will happen.
My wife had fallen. She's in really critical condition.
At that time, I thought it was just a tragic accident.
There's still a lot of questions we need to ask.
There were small things that didn't totally add up.
This is 2 lives for Harold that have died now. I was shocked. Something's not right.
Next, to the concerns over the safety of WNBA superstar Brittany Griner. She's been detained in Russia on drug charges amid the rising tensions between the U.S. and Russia. James Longman has more.
7-time WNBA All-Star and 2-time Olympic gold medalist Brittany Griner is in Russian custody. Video released by Russian Customs appears to show the 31-year-old athlete going through airport security near Moscow last month, and the video then shows an employee removing a package from her bag. Russian state media reports vape cartridges containing hashish oil found. Griner was arrested for allegedly smuggling a narcotic substance, an offence punishable there by up to 10 years in prison.
The disturbing elements of this is the fact that Brittany can be held for years. They will keep her in jail as long as they like and as long as they find it useful for them.
The Phoenix Mercury star has played in Russia for the last 7 years during the off-season, most recently with UMMC Ekaterinburg, earning over $1 million per season, more than quadruple her WNBA salary. It's unclear exactly when in February she was detained. Her last Instagram post dated February 5th. Her agent saying they can confirm that as we work to get her home, her mental and physical health remain our primary concern. In a 2017 interview with ESPN, Griner described feelings of isolation while playing in Russia.
I mean, when you're stuck in it so much, you got to find a positive in it so you're not miserable.
Now, the U.S. is urging all American citizens to depart the country immediately, and the State Department has issued a do-not-travel advisory. Secretary of State Blinken was asked what the U.S. will do to help her.
Whenever an American is detained anywhere in the world, we, of course, stand ready to provide every possible assistance, and that includes in Russia.
Griner is now one of at least 3 Americans detained there. The others, Paul Whelan, the former U.S. Marine detained in 2018 and sentenced to 16 years in prison on an espionage charge he strongly denied. Former U.S. Marine Trevor Reed, currently serving 9 years for assaulting a police officer, a crime he and his family denies happened and the U.S. ambassador to Russia said obviously didn't occur. As for Griner, it's unclear what role her detainment will play as global tensions rise.
Vladimir Putin will try to use her to get something from the West. I don't think he will succeed because we don't generally bargain with the lives of American citizens.
This as Griner's loved ones await her safe return, her wife posting on Instagram, "I love my wife wholeheartedly, so this message comes during one of the weakest moments of my life. Please honor our privacy as we continue to work on getting my wife home safely."
Our thanks to James. And as he just mentioned, high tensions between Russia and the U.S. come at a dangerous time for another American, Trevor Reed, a 30-year-old former Marine who's been detained in Russia for 2.5 years. Reed was detained by Russian police in the summer of 2019 following a drunken party in Moscow where he was visiting his girlfriend. Police initially said that they were taking him in to sober him up, but Reed was then questioned by Russian intelligence and soon after was charged with assaulting an officer. His family has called the charges trumped up and in recent weeks have been raising their concerns about their son's health. And we are joined tonight by Trevor's family, his mother, Paula, his father, Joey, and his sister, Taylor. To the entire Reed family, we thank you so much for joining us. Paula, I'd like to start with you. You recently sent a new plea to President Biden and his wife, Jill, saying in part, from one set of military parents to another, we need your help. Only you can save his life. Have you received any response?
We actually have been asked for a meeting with President Biden while he's going to be in Fort Worth tomorrow. And we got told this afternoon that they are not going to be able to accommodate us, so we will not have a meeting with him at all.
And no response beyond that, other than that you will not have a meeting. They haven't suggested that there is any ongoing conversation?
No, they have not.
And Joey, in your mind, has the United States done enough before these tensions escalated to try to bring Trevor home?
They've well, first of all, they've spoken out about our son at all levels, including the president. We're very grateful for that. The embassy and the ambassador are fantastic. Spiha's office is fantastic. But we believe at the highest levels of our government, There's been negotiations that could have accomplished a trade, could have brought home, Trevor and Paul Whelan from Russia, but for some reason the administration has not made those negotiations with the Russians like both President Trump and President Obama had done.
And when we spoke last year, when President Biden and Putin met for a summit, you had hoped that Trevor's case and a potential prisoner swap would be a focus of the meeting, but little happened. Paula, I'm curious, how concerned are you that this war and the deteriorating relations with Russia will only make Trevor's release that much more difficult?
Well, we are very concerned, not just because of the war, but because of the state of physical health that he's in right now. He is coughing up blood every day. He is having chest pain, lung pain, and he's having headaches. He's just not doing well at all. And he was exposed to TB. So we're worried about him possibly having TB, but they refuse to test him and they are not giving him any kind of treatment. So that is our main focus right now. We're mostly concerned about his health. And obviously the war in Ukraine makes it seem like there would be no negotiations to be able to go on. So we're very, very concerned about his health.
And so you just said that it seems like no negotiations would be able to go on. Have you heard one way or another what the status is? Have they just kind of dropped that at this point because of the war?
No, we've been told that communications are always left open. Even during the entire Cold War, our countries were able to communicate. And so we have been told that obviously those channels are going to be minimized over normal channels, and that could create some problems. But we still have hopes. The Russians are telling everyone, they have been for years, what they wanted. And we think that some of that is possible. And we just would wish that our government would do that quickly before the war gets out of hand or before our son dies of some disease and lack of medical care.
Taylor, when is the last time that you spoke to your brother, and what did he have to say?
I actually got to speak with him this morning. He called my parents on Friday for the first time in over 200 days. I've happened to be here this morning when he called again. We touched base briefly on the state of things in the Ukraine and his health and a couple of other little things, but he sounds incredibly discouraged and very disheartened. Hardly sounds like my brother at all anymore.
How difficult is it to communicate with him regularly? I know you said this is the first time he was able to call in more than 200 days.
232 days to be precise. They would not let him call anyone but his girlfriend in Moscow and his Moscow attorneys. And for some reason, since Friday, they all of a sudden allowed him to call the embassy, who then forwarded his calls to us. And 2 or 3 weeks ago, they started allowing him to be out of solitary confinement, where he'd been essentially for most of the last 7 months because he's refusing to work for his captors. So there's been some improvements in his treatment, over the last few weeks before the war even, and we're not sure why that's happening. We're happy that it is, but we don't know why.
Taylor was just expressing how disheartened he sounded on the phone. What do you guys say to try to give him encouragement?
Every time we get a chance to talk to him, we just remind him that we love him and we're here fighting for him and we're not going to stop. And he usually tells us that we should stop trying and to just leave him there, but we're not going to stop until he's home with us.
He feels his country's left him behind.
If you all had a moment just to talk directly to President Biden, what would you say?
We're desperate. He's the only man in the world that can bring our son home and possibly save his life. And our son's job that he volunteered extra time in the Marine Corps for and was proud of was to protect President Obama and Vice President Biden and their families, and he was willing to die for them. And we would just ask President Biden to honor that and bring this good American home who is innocent of anything other than serving his country and his president.
Paula, Joey, Taylor Reed, we thank you so much for joining us during this time.
Thank you for having us on again.
Still ahead, some much-needed good news that we all need to hear in the fight against COVID. The Supreme Court weighs in on that decision to throw out Bill Cosby's conviction for sexual assault. Celebrating the storied careers of one of the greatest to ever coach a basketball game, we take a look at Mike Krzyzewski by the numbers. But first, our tweet of the day. Lady Gaga announces her new summer concert dates.
The deeper you go into black markets, the darker it gets.
Traffic, Wednesdays at 9 on National Geographic.
Right now, with so much at stake, Sunday mornings, this is the place. Taking on all the tough questions. Straightforward reporting. No spin, no hype, no bull. Thank you for making ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos the #1 Sunday morning news show versus the competition.
Welcome to This Week.
It was a scary time.
In the 70s, you had multiple bodies showing up in Los Angeles.
There were so many murders happening. You had to have a name for it, serial killer.
There was a human head in there.
This was premeditated evil.
We have this clock. This person is going to do this again.
It's me against the killer. Who's going to win?
We'll see who laughs last.
What came next was unlike anything they had ever seen.
We love what we do.
Times are tough, but healing animals actually helps heal the community.
Thank you so much.
Representation matters. Kids see us and they say, I can do that. You want to be a veterinarian one day?
Yes.
That is awesome.
You ready to be a critter fixer? What you think, bud? Have you ever touched a cow? We get to do this as best friends. It don't get any better than that.
We're healing with feelings.
I'm Dr. Bernard Hodges.
And I'm Dr. Terrence Ferguson.
And we're the Critter Fixers.
Critter Fixers, new season Saturday, March 26th at 9 on Nat Geo Wild.
Christopher Steele.
The guy who picked a fight with 2 presidents, and he's lived to tell the tale. That now infamous dossier.
Supposedly a tape showing prostitutes hired by Donald Trump urinating on a bed, and would be quite a tape if it in fact existed.
I said take out the PP tape.
It quickly became a question of how much of this was accurate.
This is the stuff of movies.
A lot of this is the stuff of movies. Story of epic proportions.
Phony stuff.
It's a bunch of crap.
It changed history.
He thought he was God.
He's now one of the most vilified men in the world. He is the everyman. Zelenskyy is the Tom Hanks of Ukraine.
The fact that a little nice Jewish boy is 5'7" is showing up this KGB agent in the Kremlin.
What do you say to Americans who see Russia and you not only as a rival, but an unfriendly adversary?
2 men at war.
Which Vladimir will take over. The world is not going to be the same.
World News Now.
And America This Morning.
The best new videos.
Breaking news overnight.
Your money and concerns about inflation.
The pandemic is not over.
The stories people are talking about.
You don't want to shave your legs? Don't. I was gonna say. And what to expect in the day ahead.
From the top of the world, baby! ABC World News Now and America This Morning.
Weekday mornings starting at 2 a.m. Eastern.
Up all night to keep you up to date.
Take America's #1 news with you anywhere you go, anytime, free. Download the ABC News app now. Breaking news, exclusives, 24/7. There for you with one touch. The ABC News app. Download it now.
She was
diva,
drama, money and fame,
amazing,
the prime housewife.
Then suddenly,
We've seen a lot of things on The Real Housewives, but we've never seen anyone be arrested.
unpredictable rich woman. Sign me up.
Welcome back, everyone. Legendary Duke coach Mike Krzyzewski, who is retiring at the end of this season, coached his final Duke home game this weekend in Durham, North Carolina. We take a look by the numbers. Nearly 42 years, that's how long Coach K has been prowling the sidelines as head coach of the Duke men's basketball team, with his first home game way back in November of 1980. With 1,196 wins and counting, Coach K is the winningest coach in Division I men's basketball history, and he's won 5 national titles and made 12 Final Four appearances with Duke in that span. With an official capacity of just over 9,300 seats at Cameron Indoor Stadium, tickets did not come cheap for Saturday's send-off. ESPN reported the cheapest tickets were listed at $3,450 days before the game. The best seats reportedly sold for as high as $50,000. Some 96 former Duke players lined the court to greet Coach K in a special pregame ceremony, with the 75-year-old sharing fist bumps, chest taps, and hugs with his former players. Sadly for Duke fans, the team lost 94-81 to in-state arch rival UNC. Coach K currently has a 50-47 lifetime record against the Tar Heels, and 10. That's the number of letters in Coach K's famously hard to pronounce last name, which is of Polish origin, and why so many people simply stick with Coach K. And we still have lots to get to here on Prime tonight. New questions surrounding the case of that California woman who made headlines for disappearing but is now charged with faking it all. And so many compelled to help those Ukrainian refugees, the incredible outpouring of aid. But first, a look at our top trending stories on abcnews.com.
What does strength mean to you? Some say it's how fast you run a mile, but there are other ways to define strength. What matters is that we figure it out together. Fitness Together believes personal training should be just that, personal. Whether in a private studio suite or virtually on a live one-on-one session, your workout is custom built to fit your needs, so you can get strong, however you define it.
Americans who see Russia and you not only as a rival, but an unfriendly adversary.
Two men at war.
Which Vladimir will take over. The world is not going to be the same.
Now streaming on ABC News Live 2020. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues, The Hunt. True crime 2020. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
National parks are incredibly safe places. A crime will happen.
Hey, Mama. My wife has fallen. She's in really critical condition.
At that time, I thought it was just a tragic accident.
There's still a lot of questions we need to ask.
There were small things that didn't totally add up.
This is 2 lives for Harold that have died now. I was shocked. Something's not right.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
I know what happened, and I'm not guilty.
Why the fascination with criminal trials? Figure out what's really out there.
She revealed she had murdered his family.
I know in my heart that he did this.
It's the time of suspicion.
The ending's really tough.
You don't know whether truth is going to be difficult to find unless you try to find it.
America's #1 news, ABC News. Most watched, most trusted, and streaming live to you anytime, anywhere, and free. This is ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news, free to you 24/7. Watch America's #1 news whenever you want it, wherever you are, anytime. ABC News Live, streaming live and free on all platforms.
More than 2 years after the first coronavirus cases began to surface in America, more U.S. cities, states, and agencies are shifting their response to the pandemic. Today, New York City dropping its school mask mandate and vaccination requirement for businesses. New Jersey making mask optional in schools and daycares.
I like that we still have the option to do it, and they're not just gonna take our kids' masks off.
And even though the vaccine is authorized by the FDA for children ages 5 to 17 and strongly recommended by the CDC and American Academy of Pediatrics, Florida, now the first state in the country to officially advise against vaccinating healthy children for COVID-19.
It's deeply disturbing that there are politicians peddling conspiracy theories out there.
And though much of the country continues to loosen restrictions and mandates, a reminder that COVID is still a real threat as the worldwide death toll from the virus now crossing 6 million.
A monster tornado caught on camera ripping through Iowa. The National Weather Service confirms it was an EF4 tornado with winds of up to 170 miles per hour and a path of nearly 70 miles, destroying parts of Winterset just outside of Des Moines.
This is, I think, the worst anyone has seen in quite a long time.
At least 7 people killed, including a 5- and 2-year-old from the same family. More than 50 homes damaged or destroyed. A spokesperson for Bill Cosby says the 84-year-old comedian is considering a final stand-up tour. This after the Supreme Court declined to revive the sex assault case against him.
The U.S. Supreme Court declining to take up the case, rejecting a petition from prosecutors seeking to reinstate Cosby's 2018 conviction. Pennsylvania's highest court had ruled Cosby's due process rights had been violated. The actor-comedian left prison in June after serving 3 years.
Accused of faking her own kidnapping, Sherry Papini is in jail. The 39-year-old detained, authorities calling her a danger and a flight risk ahead of her upcoming court appearance on Tuesday. A spokesperson for her family claiming she was ambushed in front of her 2 children when federal authorities arrested her at their Northern California home last week. A more than 5-year investigation unraveling what authorities describe as an elaborate web of lies. Papini seemingly disappeared in November of 2016, reappearing 3 weeks later, badly injured, claiming she was abducted by 2 Hispanic women and physically and emotionally tortured, beaten, and drugged. But investigators say they've discovered Papini harmed herself to support her false statements while staying with a former boyfriend. Papini is now facing up to 25 years in prison if convicted of charges for lying to federal agents and defrauding the state's Victim Compensation Board of $30,000, which paid for visits to her therapist for treatment for anxiety and PTSD, according to the court filing.
Authorities responded to a suspected migrant situation in the Florida Keys. The U.S. Coast Guard said a vessel came ashore near the Ocean Reef community in Key Largo on Sunday afternoon. Coast Guard crews and rescue workers responded quickly to help out about 350 Haitian migrants, which included women and children. Border Patrol said about 160 people tried swimming ashore, and this isn't the first time this has happened near Ocean Reef. In January, close to 100 people from Haiti made landfall nearby. Matt Reeves' The Batman beat expectations, opening with an estimated $128.5 million here in the States. The film, which marked Robert Pattinson's bow as The Dark Knight, also stars Zoe Kravitz and Colin Farrell. It's the 4th biggest opening for a Batman movie in North America. Internationally, The Batman earned $120 million, bringing its global total to $248.5 million.
Welcome back. Next to the role cryptocurrencies may be playing in Russia's war against Ukraine. Ukraine is asking for new additional sanctions against Russia, including closing them off to cryptocurrency systems, which made us wonder about the role that emerging market has in this conflict. Our Deirdre Bolton has more.
As Visa and MasterCard suspend their services in Russia and sanctions placed on the economy take hold, many are turning to cryptocurrency.
We're watching history being made in real time here.
While other American tech companies and European ones are pushing to isolate Russia after its invasion of Ukraine, many are asking if Russian oligarchs could evade sanctions handed down.
Crypto's traceable, it's transparent. If somebody's sending Putin Bitcoin from outside of Russia in order to evade U.S. sanctions, chances are they had to buy that Bitcoin at an exchange, and that exchange has their name. While technically it could be used to evade sanctions, it's not a great way to do it.
Previously, Iran and North Korea have used digital networks to limit the effects of sanctions, but most experts agree that Ukraine is receiving the bigger crypto benefit more than Russia is in a position to abuse it.
On one hand, it's the Ukrainian government is raising war effort money. And then on the other hand, there's a lot of talk about Russia sort of using crypto to evade sanctions.
One area where crypto's benefit is clear, raising money for humanitarian aid. Just this week, Ukraine's government says it received more than $42 million in donations.
But what we are seeing is pledges of millions of dollars of cryptocurrency projects that have been pledged to us.
Save the Children has been accepting crypto donations since 2014, but the range is more varied now, accounting for the crypto world's expansion.
What's fascinating about some of the emerging currency types are NFTs. We're getting inquiries from artists wanting to create an NFT, a non-fungible token, to benefit Save the Children's response in Ukraine.
As for the big picture takeaway, the significance of the moment stands out.
You're crowdsourcing a humanitarian effort in real time, right? What an amazing use for this new technology of crypto.
Our thanks to Deirdre for that. And finally tonight, stories of how American ingenuity and solidarity with Ukraine are coming together in a big way.
Inspired by these images of Ukrainians displaced by the invasion of their country, Americans are finding inventive ways to help, even flooding Airbnb as a way to send aid.
I booked the stay and then I immediately messaged the host and said, I just want to let you know I'm not going to be coming and staying. I just really wanted to find a way to donate and make an impact.
Alexa Goodell of Miami is one of many. According to a tweet Friday night from the CEO of Airbnb, in 48 hours, 61,406 nights have been booked in Ukraine. That's $1.9 million going to hosts in need. Nathaniel and Benjamin Mendoza from Minnesota wanted to help too. So the 12 and 10-year-old brothers turned to their favorite pastime, basketball, to create a 10-day fundraising challenge. They call it 3 Pointers for Ukraine, posting this on their mother's Facebook page. Please help us support kids from Ukraine who are looking for safety, home, and food in other countries. Our mom was born in Poland, and we still have family there. Join our team.
I know that there's a lot of bad things happening in the world right now, but there's also a lot of kindness.
So far, their 3 Pointers have raised more than $12,000 from players around the world, including these 4 boys from an orphanage in Romania and these students from a school in Puerto Rico. Meanwhile, the Mendoza brothers are sharing their hoop dreams in the hopes of providing comfort and kindness to kids half a world away.
And before we go tonight, the image of the day. This firefighter holding a baby who was one of the 1.7 million refugees of the war. This image was taken on the border of Romania and Ukraine. And that is our show for this hour. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Coming up in the next hour, more on the war in Ukraine. We'll speak with a lawmaker trying to push the Biden administration to ban all Russian oil. And we're tracking those terrifyingly high.
Welcome to the future of press wires. EIN Press Wire. Everyone's internet news press wire. A leading wire service for news creators. Since 1995, we've been aggregating news from thousands of sources. Our service is designed for people just like you. Someone with news to share, looking for value, reach, results. News is organized by U.S. state, country, and industry. Easy to use, pay as you go, no annual contracts. Get distributed to TV and radio stations throughout the United States and the world. Get posted into Facebook and Twitter. Watch your news head out on EIN Press Wires and our World Media Directory. Get indexed by Google News and all the major search engines. Build high-quality backlinks. And get your press releases distributed on one of the world's fastest-spreading news apps. It's free. Download it today. You can monitor results through our distribution reports. And we are careful to make sure that fake news or disinformation doesn't make it into our wires. We consider ourselves a gatekeeper in helping to weed out that type of content. And one last thing. We fill news deserts with quality local content. Content like yours, helping smaller local publishers build more distribution. We're the future of news. EIN Press Wire. Trusted, independent, surprisingly affordable. Used by companies large and small, governments, nonprofits, and users worldwide. with a whole lot of nice people ready to help you. EIN Presswire, everyone's internet news presswire. Get started today.
Hi, I'm Kit, and this is Gary, and we created Cliff Bar. Hey, has anyone seen Gary?
No.
Hey, Scott, have you seen Gary?
Nope.
Gary! Hey, seen Gary anywhere? In the kitchen. Hey, there you are. What are you doing?
I'm testing Cliff Thins.
Cliff Thins?
It's 100 calories.
It's crispy.
And crunchy.
Now introducing Cliff Thins.
Thank you for your support.
800 points, nearly 2.5%. At least one teenager was killed in a shooting at a school in Des Moines, Iowa. 2 others are in critical condition. Police say the shooting was outside of East High, but still on school grounds. There are suspects in custody. It's unclear if the victims are students at that school. The NFL has suspended Atlanta Falcons wide receiver Calvin Ridley through at least the 2022 season for betting on games. The NFL released a statement saying that Ridley gambled on games over a 5-day stretch in November of last year when he was on the non-football injury list to address his mental health. Calvin said in a series of tweets that he bet $1,500 total, and he will be more healthy when he comes back.
Like the East Coast, where I'm
now to the
from,
war in Ukraine, tens of thousands of Ukrainians are fleeing as Russia continues to pound civilian targets. Meanwhile, efforts to establish a so-called humanitarian corridor for refugees to escape continues to fail. How Ukraine's president is now responding, and a warning some might find the images disturbing. Here's ABC's Ian Panel with the latest.
Tonight, across Ukraine, civilians are being driven from their homes by the tens of thousands. After efforts to establish temporary ceasefires were repeatedly broken by Russia, the Kremlin now claiming another one will come into force tomorrow in a number of cities. A previous corridor offered by Russia only allowing safe passage onto its own territory and that of its ally Belarus, which Ukraine calls unacceptable. So far, Russia's ceasefires set up for people to leave have been nothing of the sort. In Irpin, about 16 miles northwest of Kyiv, terrifying videos show civilians trying to escape when a mortar shell explodes. Soldiers bravely risking their own lives to give first aid. It was too late. At least 8 people were killed, including at least 3 members of the same family. At least 5,000 people have fled, many of them under fire, having to run for their lives with what little they can carry after almost a week of intense fighting in the city. As the shells landed, trying to take cover, then having to navigate a blown-up bridge to run to safer ground.
We're hearing the sound of fairly regular bombardment. We're close to the front lines, just down that road. The town of Irpin is being brutally shelled by Russian forces. Hundreds, thousands of civilians are desperately trying to get out of the town, but they've also come under fire. Some of them have been killed today, just trying to get out and get safe.
Tatiana Bogotova is a pediatrician from the town. She had to run for miles through the night to escape with 18-month-old Varvara. The Russians were there in their tanks, she says. They fired mortar shells into people's yards. I couldn't stay there with a child. Across the country, Russia's stepping up its attack, laying siege to some cities that are now cut off without power or heating. Ukraine's armed forces sharing a video of what they say is a downed Russian jet crashing. Meanwhile, a third round of ceasefire talks was held in Belarus today. Ukraine says small positive movements were made in trying to establish these humanitarian corridors. The Kremlin claims that it could stop the attacks at any moment, but only if Ukraine promises to never join NATO, to recognize Crimea as Russian, and accept the independence of Russian-controlled parts of eastern Ukraine. All have been non-starters for Ukraine. President Biden talked with European leaders today who vowed to continue raising the costs on Russia amid discussions about possibly cutting off all Russian oil and gas imports. Also, the Pentagon revealing today it ordered an additional 500
litter robots.
to deploy
The automatic self-cleaning litter box for cats. The litter robot.
We're joined now by Ian Panel in Kyiv. And Ian, I imagine there has been no indication you've seen that the temporary ceasefire Russia claims will begin tomorrow will be any different than failed attempts in the past few days?
No, I think we're right to be sceptical, and that's certainly the view from the ground. I mean, don't forget that there was, again, one of these temporary ceasefires, one of these supposed humanitarian corridors established in Mariupol over the weekend. Almost immediately, the ceasefire was breached by Russian forces, and civilians came under attack. And here's the other problem with the corridors that are now being proposed by Russia, that they say there's going to be ceasefires.
Today, Australia will be beginning imposing further sanctions on oligarchs whose economic weight is of strategic significance to Moscow.
Ukraine to the west. It doesn't lead towards Poland and Europe. It leads directly either into Russia or into Belarus, which of course is Russia's ally. So just imagine you're leaving your home because you've been under bombardment. You're running for your lives, and the Russians are expecting people to run into their arms. I mean, apart from the cynicism of that, the Ukrainian government saying that is clearly unacceptable.
And Ian, you also had the chance to visit Irpin this weekend, one of those towns close to Kyiv that has just been devastated. What struck you the most about what you saw there?
This doesn't seem to be going terribly well for Vladimir Putin. Do
You know
think
what really
he has
shocked me the most is the last time I saw
here?
people look like that. Look that
Mark,
scared.
it's a pleasure to be with you, and thanks for the reporting you're doing from Ukraine. I think he's failed already. I mean, his goals were, as reported, to subjugate all of Ukraine, to do it quickly, to do it without much of a fight, to think that Ukrainian leaders were going to flee, to think that the Ukrainian people wouldn't fight courageously as we've seen them fight, then yes, he was completely wrong. And I think he underestimated Ukrainians, and I think it's pretty clear he overestimated the capability of his own military. Now, that's not to say that, of course, as you know all too well, Mark, that the Ukrainian people aren't bearing the brunt of this, that they aren't suffering tremendously from what how Russia's adapted to that failure, which is to inflict more and more casualties on the Ukrainian people, to target the civilian populations with this indiscriminate bombing and use of artillery and rockets.
Through the night, just to reach the edge of Irpin.
Yeah, I mean, that's undoubtedly true.
So many
but
people
what about
are going
Putin,
through right
do you
now.
think?
And for
He
every person
seems
who
to be
gets out,
isolated.
there are many more who
He
are
seems
left
to have
behind,
no one
unable
that is
to get out now
able
because
to
they're
talk to him, or
surrounded
at
by the
least
fighting.
willing to
And of
tell
course,
him
they
the
get
truth.
caught in the crossfires.
I mean, how
What we
dangerous
see
do you think
repeatedly in
Putin's
conflict,
state of mind
civilians
might be?
always paying the
I think
greatest price
it's already
for
clear
something
that
they
it's
didn't
dangerous,
start
right? But it's
and they
not
can't
new
control
that
and
Putin
often
is dangerous,
can't
right? He's
escape
been a
from.
murderer.
Lindsay?
He's murdered journalists. He's tried to
Thanks so much,
assassinate
Ian.
with banned nerve agents, a political
And as
opponent,
this
a former
crisis
KGB
escalates,
agent
the
in
stream of
Salisbury, as you
humanity
know
fleeing
all
the
too
war
well.
zone
He's
only
enabled the
continues to
serial
grow. Now,
episodes of mass
1.7
homicide,
million
which are the
people have
Syrian
left Ukraine for
civil war.
neighboring countries.
He
Some of them
invaded
children,
Georgia in
orphaned due to this
2008.
horror. Matt Gutman picks up that
invaded
part of the story
Ukraine in
for us.
2014. So it's not as if this is an aberrational event. But of course, he's become increasingly dangerous, I think, Mark, because of these assumptions that he's made. He assumed that the West was weak. He assumed that Ukraine wouldn't fight. And I think what he's finding is the assumptions on which he based his decisions were quite inaccurate. He, and I would add Xi Jinping into that, his best friend, self-declared, for both of them, best friends, and the 5,000-word statement they issued just before the Olympics. And the phone call they had 24 hours before Putin inflicted these horrors on the Ukrainian people.
Do you think his senior generals go along with what he's doing here, or do you think, I mean, is it time?
12 days of horror in Ukraine as Vladimir Putin carves an even larger trail of destruction. Russia being accused of war crimes after raining down artillery shells on civilians trying to flee to safety. At least 8 people, including children, killed in a city outside of Kyiv. Ukraine says Russia is using medieval-style siege tactics to punish cities. In Mariupol, where 200,000 civilians are struggling to escape, the city has been without water and power for days, with carnage and suffering increasing. Russia has now sent nearly 100% of its forces staged at the border into Ukraine. President Zelenskyy once again calling on the West for more help.
This is murder, deliberate murder. Think about the sense of impunity of the invaders. They announced their planned atrocities. Why? Because there is no reaction. Because there is silence. Not a word. As if Western leaders have dissolved tonight. The audacity of the aggressor is a clear signal to the West that sanctions against Russia are not enough.
Let's go to Benjamin Hall in the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv, where it is, I believe it's midnight there where you are, Benjamin. What's the outlook tonight?
They announced their plan.
It is, Dana, yes, and at the moment it's quiet here in Kyiv, but I can tell you just a few hours ago there was heavy shelling across large parts of the city, around all the outskirts, to our north, our northwest, and our west. Clearly, Vladimir Putin's forces making an ever bigger push for this city. Look, on the one hand today we have seen a real escalation on the attacks on civilians. I mean, you see some of the pictures coming from cities like Kharkiv and Mariupol and Kherson. It is devastating. Whole districts absolutely flattened, leaving no doubt whatsoever that Putin is indiscriminately now bombing these cities, hitting schools and hospitals. And then on the other hand, you have Putin offering humanitarian corridors, potential peace talks. But everyone here knows those are an absolute farce. We talk about the humanitarian corridors. At Mariupol yesterday, where buses were supposed to go in and rescue those 200,000, the Red Cross today saying that that route out had been mined. On other attempts to get them out, shells fell around the buses, making it impossible to evacuate anyone. And then today, another offer for humanitarian corridors out of 6 areas. They were all leading to Russia and Belarus, asking the very people who are fleeing to head right into their captors' hands. And so right now, the trust in Vladimir Putin is incredibly low. Nevertheless, there was a third round of negotiations today between the Russians and the Ukrainians in Belarus. There was no outcome specifically. They said they discussed further humanitarian efforts, but nothing really came of it. And so right now we have this scenario where the escalation is all on Putin's side. He is hitting towns, he is hitting villages, and he's inching ever closer to villages. But the fact is the Ukrainians are still doing remarkably well at holding back the Russians. And so what the Russians have started to do is use their longer range weapons. We've seen them use longer range artillery, more from the air, and that is a lot less precise. And that's why we're seeing civilian casualties rise dramatically. Also reports that the Stingers were being so successful, these planes that were coming in lower to drop dumb bombs, those planes have just started flying a lot higher. That also means far less accuracy. So again, it is a scorched earth move at the moment, the same way that we had seen in Aleppo and Grozny. It is really worrying right now what we're seeing, and it is all because the Ukrainians have fought so well, so bravely at holding them back, that we're seeing this rise in indiscriminate attacks. Dana?
Benjamin, thank you. Stay safe, and I'm sure we'll see you on the channel later this evening. Judge Janine, for those civilians who are trying to flee, to realize that the route that they were told that they could take was mined is very offensive, just heartbreaking and offensive. And yet here they are, the Ukrainians go back to the table again today. Imagine sitting across from the Russians and asking for additional humanitarian corridors.
Well, look, the fact that they mined those evacuation corridors, the fact that there is shelling in those corridors, or that those corridors lead to Russia or Belarus is an indication that this guy is not an honest actor. We've been sitting here for 12 days, okay, and talking about him. You know, Zelenskyy put it perfectly. This is murder, deliberate murder with impunity, with no consequence. And how is it that one man is allowed to upend the world like this? How is it that he is able to push everyone's buttons and basically kill indiscriminately children with cancer who are simply trying to get their cancer treatments, children being killed with their families leaving? I don't need to describe it. All you have to do is turn on the television while the world watches. We're just voyeurs in this. I understand the no-fly zone, but even Canada has said we're not going to accept any oil from Russia. And now what we're doing, and I don't want to get into the later parts of the show, but we want to work with Venezuela. Well, didn't we hate Maduro? We want to work with Iran. Well, aren't we going to fund the nuclear bomb with Iran? And, why? It's so easy to just make a left turn, a lower turn, and go to Texas, go to Pennsylvania. We can be energy independent. And the truth, do you remember last week, Dana, when I said 48% of Americans are willing to suffer and pay higher prices? Today, it's 71% of Americans are willing to suffer the higher prices in order to help these people. We're good people across the world, and this pig has got his thumb and his knee on our neck.
Jesse, how do you assess things today?
It's awful. I mean, this was a bad weekend for the Ukrainians, for the civilians in Ukraine, and I'm not shocked anymore. I think in the beginning, people were shocked by the horror that Vladimir Putin was imposing on these people. You know, it's shocking, but we shouldn't be shocked. This guy is a barbarian. It's Napoleonic what he's doing, and it's going to get worse. And the American people have to understand that, because in the beginning, we thought the sanctions were super effective. And how could we do this? We've never seen anything like that. It's going to get a lot worse before it gets a lot better. And the president has not prepared the country for a long game. And this is a long game. Our American strategy, the Western strategy, is to turn the Russian Empire into a graveyard in Ukraine. And that's going to take a very long time. And we're going to see a lot of dead bodies. And it's going to be sad. Right now, I'm not sure in the next couple weeks or months the American people are going to vote the same way as they did in that poll. We're in recession territory, pretty much. We're already in correction territory. We can't afford $200 oil. We can't afford $5 oil. Joe Biden has not said construction costs are going up, technology costs are going up. What's he done about wheat prices? What's he done about food prices, fertilizer? The Black Sea is basically done. No shipping companies going in there. No one's underwriting any sort of trade in the entire region. So I'm afraid you're going to have a domino effect that's going to spiral out of control right as you come out of a recession. This country's not going to have a recovery if we're going to get hit in the face with $5 a gallon gasoline. And the American people are not prepared for this. The president has not prepared the country for this. And we are heading really fast to a potential war. He's talking about a no-fly zone. People are getting trigger happy. We're sending in planes potentially. What happens if a NATO ally sends in a plane and that NATO plane from a NATO country shoots down a Russian plane? You think Russia's going to be okay with a Polish plane shooting dead Russians at their doorstep? I don't think Joe Biden has wrapped his head around where we're going.
Harold?
I agree with some of the things Jesse has said, and I disagree with a slightly different point of view. I think the elements you've laid out are exactly right. I think the president's done a lot better job of trying to prepare the country for the consequences. In fact, even if he doesn't, we're living the consequences. We're paying more for gasoline. We're paying more for food. We're paying more for food. I call it the new PPP. Protect, punish, empower back. Our interests are at risk in Ukraine. Democracy, decency, humanity, sovereignty. You can't let this nation cross that line, particularly a nation with the history that the Soviets had and with the language that he's talking. We've kept together NATO. It's been hard. Now, I know that there's an interest on some to try to score political points with this, but when huge problems are in front of you, you got to solve them. And if that means bringing people together who you've disagreed with in the past in your own party, the other party, you've got to figure out how to do it. Two, you got to punish Putin. And here's where the question becomes, how much and how willing are we to pay it? That's 71, 76, 77%, whatever the number may be. How high will that number stay? And you raise this. If prices get to $10, $11, $12 a barrel, we've unplugged them from the world financial system. Are we willing to ban the kind of ban that people want, some are proposing, on their oil and energy products, perhaps similar to what Canada's done? If we do that, there's some who criticize this White House for not tackling inflation. I would dare say we've not seen inflation if we ban oil and energy products like we're saying. And finally, we got to power back. And Judge, this is where I agree with you wholeheartedly. That power back, we have to think about ways to restart energy projects here in the country, be it Keystone, be it on other leases on lands that we're not. There's been some talk from the White House about doing that. I think they need to go further. And we have to be serious and intentional about helping the Europeans. The Marshall Plan after this effort here is a Marshall Plan to help the Europeans find new energy sources. No nation should be dependent on Iran, Venezuela, or Russia for energy sources. We were able to get off Middle East oils and energy products after 9/11. We have to make that the legacy of this effort once we're able to get out of this awful episode we're in right now.
Sorry, we're going to have a chance to talk about energy in the next block. Do you want to, you had a very interesting guest, Robert Gates, on your show on Saturday night. Is there anything that he said on Saturday that now you look to Monday and say, aha, that's what he meant?
Oh, we got to choke this guy out now. I think Bob Gates, who was Secretary of Defense for Republican, Democrat, was a CIA director, worked for 7 presidents, thought he was a perfect person to say this is historic time. And I think what he was trying to say is Vladimir Putin's a bad actor. Nothing we will ever do will change the way he is. Not much different than the guy he dealt with when he came in for President Obama, when he came in for President Bush, replacing Don Rumsfeld, and then for President Obama. And he thought it was a huge mistake when President Obama said blankets and MREs when he took parts of Georgia. So here's the thing. Jesse, as much as I agree with the sentiment, we're not living in the world in which we're calling the rules right now. Right now, we are dealing with an actor that has no interest in dialing back and coming back. This is the moment that we have to stand out and choke him out, where it's going to get so much worse in 2 years as he takes Moldova, starts moving on the Baltic nations, and then the Rule 5 is not going to be a gray area, it's going to be yes or no area. Here's what I found. Macron is also on another planet. He came out and says, Russia too must be respected as a country. There is no durable peace if Russia is not part of a great architecture of peace in our continent, because history and geography are stubborn. Vladimir Putin is the problem. He cannot be brought into the family of nations. We have tried, and he's laughed in our face. He has destroyed a country. He's killing children, and he doesn't care about it. He has press conferences with flight attendants, having a great time. He does not feel this pain. We have to have total all-in sanctions, convince the Europeans to get off oil, and my goodness, do we stand for anything? 1-800-Venezuela? Oh, Iran will we'll let you fulfill what we used to get from Russia, and now we're going to actually, going to say it's only 7% of their output is our input on their oil. So that's why we should not worry about stopping Russia's input oil from coming into our country. Of course we should. We backstop it with friendly nations. We have to stand for something. We don't have relations with Maduro of Venezuela. We don't recognize him. How dare we cut an oil deal with them? With Iran? Do you know what's happening with this Iranian deal? This is a travesty what's about to happen with the Iranian deal. We're going to be fueling terror in the Middle East for the next 50 years.
We'll come back to this.
Yeah, we have more to come about this, because President Biden is looking to offset surging gas prices by cutting deals with a new set of dictators. We gave you a preview. We'll be right back.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest
deal with them. With Iran? Do you know what's happening with this Iranian deal? This is a travesty what's about to happen with the Iranian deal. We're going to be fueling terror in the Middle East for the next 50 years.
We'll come back.